and I will share my presentation. Do you see the slides? Yes, okay. Thank you. And yeah, one more thing. Astrid, how long do I have to, how long I have? Yeah.
I think last time with the presentation and the conversation, we were up to an hour and a half. So, you know, give us time to have a conversation.
Yes, yes,
So
of course.
it could be 40 minutes or something like that.
Yes, great. Yeah, I will try to keep to that. So
And go a bit longer, you know.
let's see. Yeah, I can talk for hours about this theme, but I will try to restrict myself. And actually, today I would like to talk about a new turn, let's say, in my research about navigating complex temporalities within the Ukrainian art of the wartime, and to link this navigation with cultural memory and how Ukrainian artists are interacting with cultural memory. And in my presentation, I will first of all refer to the Ukrainian arts of the wartime and how Ukrainian arts were reshaped during this, or since after the start of the full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine specifically, and even before that with the actual start of the war. I will give some references to my theoretical grounding. I will also make a little review of the research approaches, methods, and data nowadays at hand. And then I will concentrate on several analytical dimensions of the findings related to the timelines and time spaces ruptured and by the war, but transformed by the arts or through arts. So I will concentrate on regenerating everyday time space, regenerating body and self, regenerating meaningful places, and regenerating national integrity. And I will conclude with some brief theses, which are now, let's say, more in progress than are made in concrete. And I will also illustrate this presentation with the works of Ukrainian artists, with those who I work with, whom I interviewed, who I follow. And I will talk a bit more about the specifics or the specific groups they represent. This is an artistic image by artist Oleksandra from Kiev, and her self-portrait. But I should say that in a way, when I started this project, or a bigger research, my bigger research interest started in Ukrainian wartime arts. I was feeling like this self-portrait in a way, because I was experiencing many different displacements, so to speak. So as a Ukrainian sociologist, I had to leave the country and find a safer place to be and to continue my academic career. So I had to relocate, and at the same time I had to rethink some of the scientific and academic and research approaches I had, or I employed, and at the same time I had to rethink those themes I work with, because basically I've always worked with sociology of arts and urban sociology and intersections in between the two. But the war disrupted actually everything in a way. So it disrupted how I think about the cities. So these are not peaceful cities anymore. These are cities at war, what is relevant for me. Or how I think about the arts. not as peaceful and regular production of artworks or normatively existing art field, but as a practice which has become endangered by the war, and through people, artists who themselves had to relocate, many of them, or had to leave their professions because of the war to become participants of the military operations or volunteer operations. I was also thinking about what it means to actually continue doing science or arts during the times of the war and displacement, when actually one has to think about the survival or life and death questions. And especially for the arts, it's true that in these kinds of circumstances, who thinks about art or creating art isn't that too excessive or like a luxury to be an artist in these times. These were the questions around the start of the full-scale invasion, maybe throughout the whole first year of the full-scale invasion 2022, which I was dealing with as an intellectual, and I was also dealing with through my communication with artists. I should say that I have not studied specifically the art about the war or the wartime art or artists who have experienced displacement or the war before the start of the full-scale invasion. So I would say that the war really introduced big shifts in this. And I also see that artists with whom I work, they highlight that war brought a significant change into their art and into their artistic practice, so that their art is now linked with the war in this or that respect. So this is a few brushstrokes about my positionality. And maybe lastly, I am in Finland, in the safety of this country, not in Ukraine. So what I concentrate on is actually the experiences of Ukrainian artists who, as myself, relocated to other European countries, including to here, where I am in Finland, or to Finland. But I also had interviews with Ukrainian artists who had to relocate within the Ukraine, so internally displaced people, as we call them. So the displacement experience was for me a fundamental approach, so to say, to preserve this ethical rule that I myself am not working with those who are in Ukraine, because I'm not specifically experiencing what is happening inside. So I travel to Ukraine, to my home city, Kharkiv and Kiev, with to the people with whom I collaborate, but still the experience is not the same. And moving to the actual presentation, what I promised to explain is how war and the full-scale invasion in particular impacted the Ukrainian arts. I should say, and it's not only my expert opinion, but the opinion of artists whom I know, with whom I interviewed, with whom I communicated, and also representatives of arts and culture, not artists, but cultural producers or art critics or historians. So all of us agree with the key claim that war actually led to the outburst of Ukrainian arts. And this is one of the paradoxes maybe in this topic. So in a way, war is a fundamental rupture in the life of this society, rupturing the everyday routines, rupturing dismantling, violating the mere idea of being, of life, of continuity of the country, of the nation, of the culture, well, in this specific war, which we are speaking about. And it should have been expected that it would put a hold on creative activity, but it did not. After maybe some pause of a shock, artists started working wildly. Well, some of them could not resume immediately, but some of them could not actually maybe stop. So already after several months of the full-scale invasion, artists were returning back to their artistic practice, maybe in a different way, not working with big, fundamental, very well thought of works, but doing many sketches, notes, many trying to find new language to speak of the unspeakable. And in a way, we can say that war was provoking this outburst of cultural creativity. At the same time, it has provoked a very specific layer or discourse, meta discourse in Ukrainian arts. In the bottom of this slide, I have a quote from one of the cultural producers based in Kiev that who says that today all Ukrainian art is political. So doing art, being a Ukrainian artist and doing an Ukrainian artwork, claiming this artwork to be Ukrainian production is already a statement, a manifestation that a representative of Ukrainian nation, Ukrainian country, Ukrainian citizenry, Ukrainian arts is going on and works in spite of different risks and hardships. And as you also know, the Russian-Ukrainian war, or the condition of how the war is developing in Ukraine has been conceptualized through multiple terms ending with "cide," so like herbicide, culturicide, ecocide, genocide, and I guess could talk about art side or things like that. Yes, because the targets of this war are multiple and the victims of this war are multiple, not only military and civilian people, but these are the cities, the houses, the cultural and memory landmarks, architectural landmarks, water, forests, lands, well, all entities imaginable and possible. And of course, this creates this multiplicity of psychic thinking about this specific war. I don't think that it's only with the war in Ukraine, but maybe because it's now that well analyzed, followed, conceptualized, documented, we're having this developed conceptual landscape. And therefore, within this culturicide, let's say, and herbicide and some other sites, we are still dealing with a very strong and resilient wake and flow of artistic and cultural production. And this presentation specifically, as I already mentioned, is illustrated by very little, I wouldn't say even like a drop in the ocean of those artworks which appeared in 2022. And following those works, I hope that you might notice things I will try to speak about. I hope that these works would illustrate what I'm trying to analyze and these metaphors, visual, and also the words used to name the artworks would speak to you the same as they speak to me. Going further, I should say that the theoretical framework for the wider research project is variable. So in previous papers, I've been concentrating specifically on the processes of displacement and emplacement, arguing that the multiple displacements happening nowadays in Ukraine are grasped in the work of Ukrainian artists through rethinking of those places and place identities which are distorted, and finding new identities or layers of identities for those places, and developing the emplacement process or paradigm which leads to healing and restoring. As a scholar dealing with space and place, you might find this understandable why I've been working with that. But since I've been, I'm involving, or I involve myself, let's say, into the networks of the Memory Studies Association, and with our working group recently, I've been also looking into works on cultural memory and collective memory. And in here, I'm not specifically a memory scholar, so your suggestions are mostly welcome, and I am using quite basic, let's say, literature, and I'm still developing the theoretical model to speak of what I'm going to speak about today. But the most important things in my theoretical framework are the ideas that cultural memory and the basic tropes, so to say, which it nurtures in identity, is important for the identity and continuity of the society or its different groups or individuals. And war is actually bringing the fundamental shift or rupture into this continuity in cultural memory, and also in the perceptions over the basic vectors of cognition and action in the society. And therefore, cultural memory and the ongoing developments of the events which become historical during the war, they have to be renarrated or addressed anew through storytelling, speaking widely about that. And here I refer to Ricoeur and his ideas of the narrative identity and narrativization of the identity. And I link this narrativization to the sources of cultural memory, claiming that artists are going deeper into the cultural memory, and in the case of Ukraine, are actually rediscovering the cultural memory to narrate anew the basic tropes of identity, from what is the self and what is the nation or the country or the collective, to the place and space phenomena like home or borders of a specific territory, the country or the region where a person or a collective belongs. And I have not pointed out here that there are, of course, works specifically on artists dealing with war and also other critical events such as economic, political, ecological crisis, who are displaced by these critical events and who in their artworks refer to these events and try to renovate what they have disrupted. So, for instance, there are quite many works, mine already including about the home making and home envisioning practices of the refugee artists, or works about the archiving of the memories of the lost regions or cities, or lost not only materially but symbolically in the artworks of the displaced artists. And there is a growing corpus of literature in Ukrainian studies as well, to which I'm trying to contribute. So I hope this makes sense. And further, I would like to describe the research approaches and methods and data. So I've been speaking that this is a wider research project which consists actually of several minor ones, which started in 2022 and these smaller projects were framed a bit differently each time, but actually there was always a uniting meta framework for that search or academic inquiry. So the basic idea was to study Ukrainian artists who were displaced by the war and the transformations of their identities and of their art, to study how they perceive their art today, what it is about, what they try to narrate, create message with their artworks. So the combination of the personal and the professional in a way. And as I already mentioned, I interviewed and communicated with different groups of artists, always following the principles of qualitative sociological approach with such methods of data collection and as narrative autobiographic interviews, with my own deep listening during those interviews, and also elements of our ethnography, which connects with my own experience, sensorial, emotional experience as a Ukrainian person, and also following the methods of analysis such as interpretive analysis of narratives. And different groups of artists I've mentioned are here also in the points you see on the slides. They are presented in more detail, but basically these are Ukrainian artists in first year of the full-scale invasion whom I followed, who displaced generally, so they could have been either in Ukraine or in some European countries. And also the group I'm working with now is a growing group actually of Ukrainian artists and cultural workers, let's say, in Finland. And yeah, and their group and community, as I said, is growing, and we are actually now working on establishing an association of Ukrainian artists in Finland. So additionally to the interviews in Finland, I'm able to visit the events, talk to artists informally, see how they work, visiting their studios, and keep on my own diary, so to speak, of those events, and also of my own vision of the developments in Ukrainian arts of the wartime. And today, and I will start speaking of that in a minute, the research foci for my talk are, or the research questions are, how does Ukrainian wartime art deal with the disruption of the basic identity tropes and time and space continuities? And how does it interact with and shapes cultural memory when addressing the disrupted identity tropes and disrupted time and space continuities? And I would like to now go deeper into the findings or analytical dimensions, which are four, each of them interweaving these ideas of time and space transformation during the war and renegotiation in the arts and in the artworks, which is based, at least partially, on interacting with cultural memory. And firstly, I would like to speak of the everyday time space, which is something maybe of a wider framework, which entails other three dimensions I will speak about later, but which is also quite specific because here I'm speaking about the everyday life as we conceptualize it in sociology, yes, through the everyday routines, rhythms, familiarity of spaces and places, familiarity of the routines themselves. And everyday time space is, of course, relevant for creating the everyday memories, which then go into the longer term memory, so to say. So this is an active memory making space, which we do not notice if there is nothing happening. But the war actually ruptures the everyday routines, rhythms, and familiarity of space and place. And it ruptures it all, not just a sequence of days, but also how the space is perceived, how everything is perceived, like from your own home, which can be bombed at this very minute, to the streets you see from your window, to the outskirts of your city, which can be invaded by the tanks or techniques, especially this was the panic of the rupture of the everyday, in the first days of their full-scale invasion. And artists who themselves experienced this break in the flow of life, they are trying to actually, and I'm seeing what they are doing, yes, and this is already my interpretation, of course. So they are trying to introduce symbolic anchors for continuity of the everyday time and space. For instance, they are trying to rethink the continuity, or actually to stitch some bits of continuity through specific everyday and artistic gestures, or through specific semiotic artistic frameworks they are developing in their artworks. They're also trying to, or they are actually creating an imaginary timeline which would have in itself the continuity, and in contrast to the distorted everyday continuity, which they do not see anymore. And this imaginary timeline is created within materiality and symbolism of their artworks. And here we'll comment a bit on the artworks themselves. Here you're seeing the textile book created by artists from Kiev, which is called the Emergency Bag, and each sheet or textile sheet of this book is actually a collage created by one person, so it's a participatory book. collage of symbols representing items which a person would have taken into the emergency bag, which were actually not maybe the ones the person took, but maybe these are the items which were left behind. So in a way, this textile book is creating a classification of different objects taken or actually left behind, thought through the prism of the emergency situation. And the book itself creates a manifesto in a way of the continuity of this object making, of object interaction with symbolic objects. Through, in reality, there was a rupture, so that some people had to leave their homes behind with many objects and with many things. They could take only very few, very specific. Some could have lost all their objects and all their loved little things because they have lost their homes. But this imaginary book is actually giving the story or the space to tell the story about those objects. And what is important also is that this book is a sequence of those stories put into a bigger story. And artistic strategies, which are very important in the sequencing of the, or in this reconstituting of the everyday time space, is or are like that. They are recording and they are sequencing. In the book, you have already saw some sequencing and some recording. In recording, I'm referring to the artistic gestures and semiotic frameworks, which are artistic diaries, photo archives, sets of sketches, which actually functioned as and still function because artists still run these formats as temporal anchors, marking the days, marking the time, marking what's lost, marking what's kept, marking what's taken into other circumstances, and also sequencing. For instance, there have been many series of artworks which have appeared since 2022, which are timelining, storytelling, different developments in environments or processes or with objects or even with the memories. And in these two examples, you see that two different artists are referring to the same theme, the still life of everyday objects, which are transforming into silhouettes or are actually vanishing from the background of the everyday space, calling this series still life and making series out of these remunerations of theirs. So I see this as a quite significant strategy which is developing to order the everyday time space. And in terms of cultural memory, it is a bit maybe complex to say what is here and happening here in terms of cultural memory, but I am now thinking that these very objects, which are vanishing or which were taken with or which were left behind, they are becoming the carriers of the specific memory of the time which was before, yes, and this time which was before and this life which was before, so pre-war life, becomes already a part of the culture of the Ukrainians. So for us, it's very specific. Yeah, so it was a demarcation in our life on February 24th. It's very specific, very like we feel it, yeah, with our bodies and in our mentality. So culturally, this pre-war is significant, and after war as well. So in a way, this shift, this divisions and everyday life, how it was before, how it is now. During the now wartime, everyday time space is becoming cultural and is surely connected with the cultural memory and how it's structured, how it's periodized. Second dimension I would like to speak about is the body and the self. And it is, I would say, each dimension is a bigger theme in itself. And I can already disclose that I'm now thinking of a monograph which could be speaking to those specific themes in more detail. But coming back to the brief overview, the body and self are, of course, transforming pretty much as well during the war. War reduces the existence to corporeal vulnerability. So war actually puts the life and death question in front of us, like in your face. And many artists have started working with bodily memory to generate this fractured self, the fractured body. Certainly, this is more relevant for artists who have been involved into performance and theater and alternative theater and psychodrama and things like that, but not only. The body appears as a body, as a fractured body, or a self. Identity appears in the self-portraits or representations in other media, artistic media. And what's interesting in here, that body becomes hyper-present in the artworks. And yeah, it's like overt, and the emotions are very intense, which are communicated. It can be even violent for those who are looking from outside without the experience in the background. But at the same time, through this depiction or performative transformation, the body is restored. So the idea is, of course, not to show the blood or death only, but to restore the idea of the integrity of the body and of the self. And what's interesting in here, that it is done quite often with symbolic add-ons, cultural references taken from cultural memory. So going to the next slide here, it's more evident. Here you see the photograph from the performance by Marina Semenkova, who is wearing a sort of a metaphorical traditional short, Ukrainian short, and she paints herself, that is actually a cloth, and she paints herself on her body with the markers, red and black, the traditional embroidery flowers. These markers are actually so strong, so intense, that they go on her skin through this cloth. And then she cuts off these flowers from her shirt. And there you see the skin with those traces, red and black, which are resembling bruises or some wounds. And it's better to see than to explain in words, but it is a very strong message that the self, the body, is actually the Ukraine itself. And this framing of someone as a Ukrainian body is really strong. And it's not only in this specific performance, but I am seeing this in others. There are artistic strategies, different artistic strategies to speak about this body and self. For instance, there are quite many practices of artistic writing nowadays, not only within the writers or literature artists, but also within the visual artists, performance artists. So they take notes, they write, and through this writing, they're as Evgenia Belorusets, one of the well-known artists of Ukrainian scene, said, it's like deoccupying of the memories, which were occupied as well as cities by the war. I already mentioned the performances, which are focusing on bodily memories and experiences, individual and collective ones. And these cultural bodily markers in performances, which come in a very interesting manner, communicating with the cultural memory. What I mean is that performance artists like Marina, like others, are appealing to traditional motifs or lyrics or symbols through clothes, which are very intimate, or through singing the lyrics, which comes through the throat, through the individual voice, making this really bodily and very intimate interaction with the symbols coming from the repertoire of the cultural memory, and artwork centered on intimate experiences, such as the book I showed you before, the textile book. And going further to the third dimension, I would like to speak of regenerating places. Many artists are working with significant places, one of them being the home as a generic topological archetype of intimacy, self-existence, self-enablement, ownership, close circles, family. And actually, in working with home, with depicting it, also there is an interesting interaction going on with cultural memory and rethinking the home not only as my own home somewhere, but as in this picture or collage, better say, by Irina Bondarenko, rethinking it as an archetype, as you might see, I hope you see. This is a traditional Ukrainian hut, like with white, white traditional painted walls and roof from straw. And this is the archetype of a home. No one of us lives there anymore, including Irina, who is my person from my home city, Kharkiv. But thinking of the home and of the lost home or of the troubled home, a violated home, artists appeal to the cultural archetypes. And I assume they are channeling the, let's say, energy of this archetype into the artwork, messaging that all our homes, even if they would be lost, actually remain as our memory structures, and we can remake them materially. The most important, that they remain in our cultural memory as an archetype, and also individually in our memories as some structure, metaphor, which is there, which we keep and then can recompose. And there are also other meaningful places which appear in the artworks. And here are two examples of one interesting artistic strategy. There are viral symbols, as I call them, from the wartime streets, which are traveling across artistic media. This, for instance, is a symbol of the monument covered with the sand sacks to be protected. Here it's better visualized that these are actually different phantoms or metaphors of monuments which are protected with this maybe a bit fragile frame, but still protected through action, through will of the people there on the ground protecting them. This is also a symbol of the wartime streets themselves, yes, which are transformed by the war. They are burned or they are dismantled or something is ruined, but at the same time there are signs of protections, of reappropriation. And what is also important is that inside these sand piles there are cultural landmarks, for instance, historical figures important for Ukrainian independence and culture, which are representing the sacred. So the sacred is inside the frame created by the people amidst the street, which is violated by the war. And this is a very strong symbol. That's why I guess it is viral and is actually traveling across artistic works and artistic media, as well as we have seen that there are some others traveling like that, because it's a signifier of a very specific place-based experience on one hand, and on the other, it's also symbol of the resistance and grassroots reappropriation of what's taken from us, what's violated. Yes, but we are fighting for that. And also there are other place-specific symbols which are constructed and saturated with meaning, or actually deconstructed if they are related to the contested cultural memory. For instance, if these are symbols from imperial and Soviet eras representing these colonialisms, they can be deconstructed, rethought, mocked, criticized artistically. And finally, I'm coming to the fourth dimension, which I'm calling now regenerating national integrity. In a way, it is about the continuity, time-space continuity of the everyday and of the place, but in a very specific sense of this, highlighting that we are speaking about the nation culture, the political agency of nation, patriotism as a feeling, and relevant things. And of course, in this, we should understand immediately that in spite of the critiques of nation culture and of nations as such, in Ukraine, we are now dealing with a situation when arts and culture are nation defined, and they are very much linked to the nation building. And yes, this is how it is. Criticize that or not. And yeah, this is how we might say that there might be some messages which are entering, let's say, the right-wingish symbolisms or whatever. But in here, I would like to actually say that in my eyes, there is a space for healthy patriotism, as Martha Nussbaum would put it, for healthy national culture and integrity. Maybe we will come in some years into the thinking about the civic integrity and culture, but now it's not like that. Now what we see is that Ukrainian as a predicative is looking at us from every artwork in this case. And for instance, artists themselves with their artworks are bringing up themes and speaking up the language, which becomes explicitly political, and political in terms of national politics, from a personal Ukrainian self to a personal to a Ukrainian home. It's not just any home; it's a Ukrainian home. It's a Ukrainian self, from Ukrainian culture to Ukrainian land, and so on. And also artists in their visual language or sensorial language, they employ openly symbols of national identity or political or symbolisms coming from different political wings or movements, historical including military forces, historical including trying to deepen the historicity of their narrative, their building of independence, integrity, and I would say also archetypes of the nation culture. Here I would like to comment on this picture by the famous artist Nikita Kadan. And this is a picture where he is speaking or developing a vision of the Ukrainian land. And you know that land and earth are among the core archetypes for Ukrainian culture, because we are, first of all, the agrarian culture, let's say. And on this land, which is invaded by the Russian military, he shows the shadow of a fallen someone. And knowing his comment on this work, this is fallen someone is a invader, an enemy, who is becoming only a shadow on the earth, meaning that this shadow will disappear and the land and the earth will actually restore it. It will engulf the invasion, the invaders, whatever is happening, and it will restore the full, the new cycle will begin. The shadows will disappear. But at the same time, this is maybe not that only an optimistic picture, because of course death is here, and death, like in any case, this is a death of a human being. Yes, this is a human body, which is a tragedy, of course, and the land is experiencing this tragedy. So there are many meanings here which refer to the national integrity, but also, I would say, even into the ecumenic, ecological, socio-ecological, planetary integrity, if you want to say that. But yeah, many interpretations can be expected. But here is a blunt message about the narration or re-narration of the national integrity by the street artists. That's why I guess it's more blunt, because the national symbolic code appears openly in artworks which are having this political / public format, such as street artworks or sticker art or postcards, those who speak to wider publics, less exquisite, less white cube gallery type, but art of the streets. It is actually more open in how it uses the national signifiers and how it messages the national presence. And also what's interesting in terms of artistic strategies, that in the discursive how would I put it? Let's say trajectories of the artworks, be it visual or otherwise sensorial, there are symbolic actions messaged, which could be described through verbs such as stitching, like here specifically, or bordering, or differentiating, or holding together. So all of those us and them opposition, which becomes explicit during the war, such as the Russian-Ukrainian war, the specific type of the war in between two countries, when one is invading another. And I guess that it is also important to recognize that this kind of re-narrating of national integrity, of course, it appeals to the things being there in the cultural memory, or different symbolisms which we can see there and or attribute to it. And finally, I will conclude with brief conclusions that through the war, as I try to show ruins, different continuities, spatial and temporal, in wartime art of Ukraine, artists are creating, or at least trying to create, alternative time spaces, bringing into them some depth. It can be historical depth, and can be actually existential depth. And also, very often, the overall mission, a cathartic mission of this art is about healing, repair, restoration. And there obviously is work with those basic identity tropes, self, home, place, nation, country, and it happens across artistic genres and media. Of course, there are also specifics. And in reiterating this continuities and those tropes, Ukrainian artists, in a way, rediscover Ukrainian cultural memory. Ukrainianness as such, what it actually means to be a Ukrainian, what is what is it? Ukrainian, Ukrainian house, whatever. Also, authentic cultural code, for instance, those visual, national symbols, historical figures and events, cultural archetypes lying even deeper than Ukrainian nation in history. And also they are, in a way, not always, not fully maybe, but refining their themes and languages according to this search. And lastly, why I am speaking of the rediscovering of the cultural memory is because I could claim, and it's not only my idea, of course, that specifically now, since the full-scale invasion, Ukraine and Ukrainian people are actually started going deeper into the Ukrainian language, Ukrainian history, Ukrainian mythology, Ukrainian culture, because we are going away from the Russian dominant or Soviet Empire framed cultural programs and frameworks. We're going away from Russian culture, Russian literature, Russian media, things like that. And there is a lot of this work, memory work, I should say, which is happening right now and happening also in the arts, sometimes more explicitly, sometimes less explicitly, and it has its fruit and meaning. Okay, I will stop here. Thank you. And yeah, I guess we have half an hour. Yes?
Thank you. That was really, really rich and interesting. I don't want to take the privilege of chairing. Nella, would you like to chair? No? Okay. But I meant also, I don't need to ask the first question if anyone else has an immediate response. If not, then I can ask the first question. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, thank you. I've been really interested in Ukrainian art, but most of the artists you introduced, I didn't know, and I'm really interested in looking at their work further. What I found, what struck me was the one artist that I have researched in detail and have spoken about in also in our memories in the MSA context is Nikita Kadan.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it really interesting that you showed his work exactly at the point when you spoke about using healthy patriotism and using national symbols, etc. While I, in my reading of him, always thought that he was quite courageously trying to still be critical of nationalist narratives and looking looking critically at Ukraine between East and West and and the past and the collaboration with the Germans, and all these thorny issues. So it's not really a question, it's more an observation, but you might want to respond to it. It was interesting that you put him in that section of the national symbols. But of course, I can see that there are works in which he is dealing with symbols.
Yes, well, I'm not linking this specific work with national symbolism, but with national integrity. And here, yeah, I tried to highlight as much as I could that it is a controversial in itself dimension. And as a researcher, I do see that there are controversies and that actually it's a bit problematic nowadays to step out of this nation culture framework and to suggest regional readings, for instance, because there's no place for regionalism during the war. Let's say, at least on the populist political debate, there is regionalism in everyday life, and I can say it very with full understanding of it, because I am myself from Kharkiv, so the Easterner, as we say it, and yeah, we are quite different from the West, for instance. But here, what I wanted to highlight also is that we need to somehow speak about what's happening in terms of this rethinking of Ukrainianness as some holistic or generic metaphor, because even if Nikita, and I know what you're speaking about, what you're referring to, even if he is critical of the let's say dominant discourses, still what he is trying to do is to show or to solidarize with a Ukrainian struggle for independence, against the war, for its freedom, integrity, and using or talking about the land or the earth and the soil. It was actually a collective exhibition, and this is only one of the works at Mistetsky Arsenal in Kiev, where this metaphor and archetype and matter of soil and land and earth were discussed by Ukrainian artists. So he is actually juxtaposing, and in his comment, as I said, he's juxtaposing our land and them invaders who will disappear as shadows. So in a way, it is about us and them, us staying, them disappearing, our land, their invasion, our land, their body, different temporalities of those. And yeah, I would say that it is not nationalistic, but somehow it's about Ukraine-ness in this case. Yeah. But I agree with you that this like comment on the side of the paper has to be made that no, he's not a nationalist. No, that's not like that. Yes.
Thank you. Annette.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really fascinating. I really enjoy, if I can say that, your presentation. I have a question about the body. You spoke a lot about the body, and at war, the bodies of soldiers and even the bodies of civilians in the case of occupation, as you know very well with the Russian crimes in Eastern, Russia. And these artists seem to totally put out this part of the war, which wounds and which kills. And when you show the body and you just speak about Kadan work, it is a body of a soldier, as you said, but I took a photo and looked very precisely. And it says to me, it's a photo of a monster. And it looks that he has a tail, if you look very well at the drawing of the shadow. So it will be a way for Kedan not to be a nationalist, but just to look at how the war can transform you. And the Russian has become a kind of beast. For me, this shadow was very much like shadows used by artists during the First World War to show the depravity of the Germans. So I wanted to ask you that. And my second thing is not a question. It is that I've been to every biennale in Venezia, and so I was in 22, and it was absolutely amazing how Ukraine was at the center. Then in 24, there was quite a lot of exhibits about Ukrainian art, and there was no pavilion for Russians. And this year, as you know, in 26, the Russian pavilion is going to be reopened. I just wanted to say that the artistic community is not thinking right, I think.
Thank you, Annette. Yeah, these are political games, and in a way, it's I'm referring to your later comment, and in a way, it's a real struggle for Ukrainian community now, including researchers, so academics, and including arts and culture community to sort of still keep the line and try to insist that the war is still there, going on, and with the same savageness, bringing the same amount of destructions, losses of lives, and yeah, playing in negotiations with Russia is a good thing, maybe just not for Ukrainians. But coming back to the first comment, I've checked now. Well, I haven't seen the tail, but maybe the tail you talk about, it's like this arm.
No, it is on the
Yeah.
right. You have the two legs and a kind of.
Okay.
Oh, it's not real hands. It's like a beast hands, and it's not real feet. It's like a beast feet. That's what I thought of that.
But
Because many cartoons of the First World War showing the Germans like that. And I know a little bit. Kadan is very, very learned. He knows this kind of thing.
I agree. Yeah, I agree in the let's say not only Kadan's strategy, discursive strategy, symbolic strategy, in a way to monsterize or create the image of the beasts of when speaking of the invaders, and an emotional strategy, an intense strategy, maybe for the after war or peaceful times controversial strategy, but at this specific moment of time, strategy which is justified by the emotional intensity of the savageness and the brutality and schizophrenia of the invaders, so to say. So the mystification is there, and that's true. And it is takes different phases. But yeah, when I was speaking about the body, I also referred to specifically to the performance examples, and to the performance by Marina Semenkova, for instance, with this white shirt when she's drawing traditional embroidery, flowers on this cloth, and then cuts it off from the cloth. So she's, yeah, in the cut short. So I hope, yeah, you can imagine at least briefly that she becomes naked with this cut offs out of her body, out of her shirt. This is speaking to the bodies, I would say, of the Ukrainians, yes, of the civilians and of the military, and more. We can say that's not only the human body; it's more than human body. So we can imagine that the house would be standing there in the city for whatever amount of time, and then it's just shelled, and then there's cuts in the houses, and it becomes holed. Yes, so it covers with those holes, and yeah, it's metaphor of cutting out, of making holes in the integrity of a body, be it a body of a person, a body of an object. And in this case, what's significant is that it is symbolically charged or highlighted through the use of the cultural code. There are quite many artworks which are speaking about the bodies of civilians, of the military, bodies which are enduring, living bodies, also corpses. It is now a discussion in Ukrainian artistic scene, or I would say art critics. How much do we actually go into depicting bodies? And some of the works are there, like that, referencing to that. And they are very triggering a lot of intense emotions, and they need mediation for the viewers. And also there is a lot of debate about what kind of artworks, more violent, less violent, we exhibit in Europe outside. Like, we sort of have to, not to censor, but somehow to censor, to adapt the visionary, or what's showed to the more peaceful European art scene or spectator, so that not to trigger again. But at the same time, when I'm speaking with artists who have experienced violence, specifically different kinds of violence, losing homes or being from under the bombs, they actually are saying that for us, it is an important thing that we are able to show not the adapted picture, not like the more tolerant picture, but a very open and brutal picture of violence, of what's happened to us. Not necessarily in public, but for us, we are having these images, like haunted by those images. They are. And I should say that in a way, it is psychological journey, maybe from this trauma and processing trauma like that to recovery. And of course, it's an ethical issue, I guess. Again, how and what we show to wider publics when we speak about the war, and what kind of artworks we are showing, images. It actually concerns not only artworks, but photography, for instance, or documentation, or film. So yeah, we have to show, but how to show in a way that it won't actually violate others. Yeah, a very ethical, a very sensitive question. I hope I answered.
Absolutely.
Annette.
Thank you so much.
I think Lee is next, and then Monica. Monica first? Okay.
Thank you, Lee. And thank you, Oleksandra, for your presentation. Just from your current comment, I was thinking about a recent debate that I was also following along on this question of how sometimes now the art that is depicting war can also, I'm trying to find the right word, sanitize or somehow aestheticize art experiences. And I wonder if you are also reflecting on this subject. In particular, you were speaking about international art fairs like Venice or other places that have only been picking up on Ukrainian art from the moment of the full-scale invasion and not from the previous example of like how Donbass was occupied. So there's this interesting aspect also of how art, like art on war, is being, somehow like commercialized or somehow also instrumentalized in some ways. So there's somehow two different parts perhaps of my question. On the one hand, like, what are your thoughts on this? Like also something that has been roaming in my mind also recently when I was reading about this. How do we deal as artists or culture workers with, on one hand, wanting to depict the war, but also in a sense, people through this kind of artistic experiences become used to the war. There's like almost like you were speaking about like re-traumatization, but there's also a threshold that somehow sinks through this experience of constantly being confronted with art that is depicting war. And then on the other hand, perhaps also on this question of how institutions are only kind of joining this like reflections on certain places once they are being kind of in the center of media attention.
So I'll start with the last one, with the media attention. Well, I'm a sociologist, so for me there is no news here. It's the laws of capitalism, media capitalism, and art capitalism. Art being a field regulated by these laws of maximizing experience, maximizing attention. And when something is hot, then we are maximizing that. At the same time, there are, of course, in terms of Venice Biennale, I'm not criticizing that. I'm not denying the Venice Biennale. I think it is an important space to form the international policies in the spheres of art. Yes, they are referring to the hot pie theme, but at the same time they are reacting to what's happening. This is somehow responsiveness of these big events, but the bad thing is that there is no consistency. There is no long-term strategy, and this responsiveness transforms. I'm now going to say something very maybe radical, but this responsiveness might transform into prostitution. And I am not sure that this kind of policies which are jumping like that, we are having the Russian pavilion, we are not having the Russian pavilion, we are again having the Russian pavilion, like it's not consistent in my opinion. There are other ways, and there are a lot of bright minds behind the Venice Biennale to think how to message the changing. political landscape without violating the consistency of cultural vision. But it is unfortunate that that there is as if little to be said to this. Only the struggle can go on the level of on the medium level, or on the level of the representation of the pavilions, let's say. So as I know and as I hope that. And I'm not sure that I can support this, but yeah, at least I will follow this, that Ukrainian group cultural or Ukrainian pavilion will of course message the full unacceptability of having the Russian pavilion back again when the war is there, and there is no obvious stop in this war, which would be just. Speaking of justice. And the first question about, if I got it right, about the aestheticization of the violence in a way, and this, and also being exposed to the war. There are quite many things in this one question, but also follow these discussions, and I agree that it is an important issue, that the condition which is global of having a lot of wars and military conflicts and other sorts of crises which produce displacements and human suffering, that they can be depicted, and after that the eye gets blurred, and or they can be depicted as something aesthetical and, I don't know, leading us to the new era of cultural decadence or whatever. But this is somehow there's this fine line, or thin line, better say, between the aestheticization and the openness, the frankness of this depiction. And it's for me it should be the collaborative decision where this thin line lies. Collaborative decision of art critics, historians, artists, curators, and let's say representatives of the community, which are sometimes forgotten. And this is an important debate. From what I follow at the bigger events, there is a vector, sort of for the Ukrainian pavilions or Ukrainian artists and curators to be working with more and more participatory and dialogical forms of artworks or art projects, involving more than an artist voice into this discussion of the war. And it is important and significant. So, for instance, the work with the archives of video materials showed it by the ordinary people, which is then reworked into some kind of a collaborative video archive of the war, or things like that. We're working with sensitive communities who are messaging their specific experiences of the war. And this openness or dialogical relational arts is important. Participatory arts in good sense of the word participation, not using the participants, but making them or inviting them to be co-creators. However, here we also run into another thin line between the participation and faking it. But I agree that this is also a risk to aesthetize or to blur the eye or to overexpose people to these kinds of visions that, yeah, we can lose the focus. I hope I answered.
Yes, thank you so much.
One could, of course, speak a lot longer on this subject, but people are slowly dropping off. But Lee, did you still want to say something? You seem to have taken your hand away.
Yeah, thank you. I have two related questions. And first of all, thank you, Oleksandra, for introducing these artists. Some of them were really a revelation. I'm thinking about the rapid institutionalization of Ukrainian war art. I mean, you mentioned, one of your slides mentioned the ministry, the Ukrainian war art collection, and you also mentioned that some artists already are thinking about an association, and of course the Biennale. So if we think about the war in Ukraine, first of all, it's very complicated to think about this in terms of memory because this is still ongoing, and yet what you called or said risks prostitution in the sense of pleasing the audiences who really crave these images, is also maybe something that has to do with the way institutions very readily adopted or also were established around this art. And I'm thinking particularly about, for example, Palestinian art or artists for Palestine, which is still very subversive and very political and very, very, dissident to the core. And I think that that's something different than what we even saw here in the artworks that you presented. And my other question, again, thinking about this memory, are there any outsider artists? If we think about these institutions, can you already spot outsider artists that are thinking about the war and are creating outside the burgeoning narration or re-narration of that war?
Thank you, Ali. I will try to answer really quickly. Yes, I agree with you, and your observation is correct that there is also institutionalization process happening, and that's due to different kinds of factors, pull and push triggers, so to say. So, for instance, there are investments or let's say support, cultural support coming from Europe and internationally, and there is therefore some material basis to create these kinds of things like institutions, for instance, new galleries or projects which are archiving of wartime art. There are also national programs like that. So this archive I mentioned and the slide run by the Ministry of Culture. Actually, the project run by the Ministry of Culture for some reason now is terminated or on hold. But the idea there was to collect the archive of the wartime art starting 2014. And it is somehow an idea which is correlates with the historicity of the events, I guess, and also with the strategy to archive everything now, to collect all data related to the war, including the artworks. Also, what I see is that there is a lot of interesting initiatives happening in the civic society, and I would even say that there are many more civic society initiatives, like for instance, little associations and groups establishing their micro galleries, micro publishing houses and so on, disseminating and doing cultural activities. Sometimes they're temporary, but they do exist, and this is on the wake of this involvement and emotional and passionary and missionary idea that we need to solidarize and do something now, act now, and also the wish to be active in these circumstances. So a civic society is very active, and there is even many contradictions, many debates or heated discussions in between the civic society actors and the meta-institutional actors. But I should say that not everything is covered by the institutions or rigid institutions. These are like para-institutional processes and in their own way. And also there are groups which do not institutionalize at all. For instance, this association I was mentioning in Finland, yes, there is this wish to have an association, but more a wish which is about having the community to support each other, being displaced, migrants, refugee professionals, in the context where not everybody can actually continue being an artist. This kind of an association is sought for to support the community, but also to apply for grants. That's true. And at the same time, there are groups, as I said, who are not willing to institutionalize at all. And there are outsider artists. Well, in a way, they're also having their own little communities. For instance, I'm now following queer Ukrainian artists, displaced and not displaced ones, and they are very well networked, and they cooperate very well in between Ukraine and other countries. I don't know, maybe because they're a specific, more limited group, and they are a group at risk in some ways, even in Europe. Not everybody wants to be a queer artist and say about it openly. And yeah, in a way, they might feel themselves as outsiders. Actually, some of the queer Ukrainian artists with whom I work are participants of the Outsider Art Festival here in Helsinki. I'm speaking now from Helsinki. So it is very actively that this institutionalization process and this process of association in sociological terms is developing or are developing simultaneously. This is my diagnosis. Yeah. I hope I answered it all. Maybe I forgot something, but thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, yes, as I said before, there could be a lot more, but I think we need to come to a close. It was wonderful, Oleksandra. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Also, briefly to ask people, the next meeting in 2 months would be the 11th of May. Shall we put that as the next meeting? And as usual, I will ask everyone or I'll ask if there's anyone who would like to present something, because that's the most interesting, I think, for us at the moment, to keep the groups like this with a presentation. So is there a nod for 11th of May? I saw a couple of nods. Okay, so I will send out an email. Okay, thank you so much again, Oleksandra, and everyone who stayed until the end and showed you how interesting it was.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you for the questions and yeah, for hosting. And I will share the recording then with you, right?
Yeah, would you, how do you want to do it? Share it just with me or send it out to everyone, or should I say whoever is interested should contact you?
I can send it to everyone, whatever you say. Well, it's fine with me.
Yeah, well, then that would be nice.
Okay, good.
you can do that yourself. You have
Yes.
the
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.